Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration tools. And we've actually been doing this for the last 13 years with healthcare companies across the globe. We've been helping them with everything from virtual advisory boards, digital investigator meetings, helping with protocol development, virtual medical education. And since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've been also helping pharma companies with MSL training, corporate events, innovation hackathons, and all kinds of virtual programs. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare leaders, we can all work to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super happy to having one of these thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Andreas Weber. He is the CEO of a company called EvidentIQ. It's a next generation technology amplified data science group championing new standards in value creation and innovation driven relevance for customers. With a strong background in strategy consulting, Andreas has been supporting the life science industry for more than 23 years. Prior to joining the EvidentIQ group, he was working with sponsors and CROs as Global VP Business Development at ERT and Vice President of Business Development for APAC EMEA at eClinical. He has also spent many years at Oracle's Health Sciences Global Business Unit, leading their consulting sales teams. With his in-depth knowledge of dynamics and trends in the life sciences industry, Andreas is a recognized expert and speaker at various industry events. Welcome, Andreas. So happy to have you on the show today.
I'm very happy to be here today with you, Natalie. Look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So very exciting that you're CEO of a really amazing company that we're going to jump into, but obviously had a very colorful and very interesting background. I was wondering if you could speak to the audience very briefly of how you landed in your position today.
How I landed my position today at EvidentIQ. Well, actually, EvidentIQ is a company that consists of the merger of three very successful companies in the life sciences industry. One was called eClinical, a German-based company delivering state-of-the-art eClinical technology to the market, really. And the other one was Fortress Medical System, a company with a similar portfolio based in the United States, in Minnesota, pretty much focusing on the medical devices industry. And the third one is Paris-based Carnity, which is a digital CRO, I would say. What we're doing at Carnity is we are supporting sponsors and also CROs with the collection and analysis of real-world data predominantly. So how did I land there? I've been spending many, many years, as you said, Natalie, in big corporates, actually the life sciences industry, such as ERT, eClinical, and Oracle Health Sciences. And I was actually approached by our investors with a vision to build something which is really unique in the marketplace. Because if you look at things, what you will find is there are a lot of technology companies out there. There are a lot of data companies out there as well. But the combination of technology and data is still very rare in our industry. And my vision was really to build exactly that, to build a company that is actually great in collecting and analyzing data for our customers, but can also at the same time deliver the technology, the underlying technology, and bring it all together in the technology to the benefit of our customers.
Yeah, beautifully said. So I'm actually just curious as well what the world looked like prior to COVID-19 and what has happened to your company since the pandemic. Has there been an inflection point? What has changed for EvidentIQ?
It has been indeed an inflection point. Before COVID, terms like decentralized trials, DCTs, virtual trials, hybrid trials, all of that has been a buzzword in the industry for quite a long time. But the adoption rate has been fairly low, I would think. So if you look actually before COVID, there were probably not more than 10 fully DCTs that have been conducted globally in the entire world. Now, COVID has been pretty much a catalyst for all of that. And our customers, being it CROs, being it sponsors, being it medical devices companies, they've been realizing that it's not only a buzz, that there's a lot of value at the end of the day to conduct studies, either fully or some elements of them virtually. And we have EvidentIQ, we have been actually seeing a big intake in the adoption rate in virtual trials, right? So everything what can be virtualized right now should be virtualized. And I think that mindset and that spirit hasn't been before there in the marketplace.
So in some ways, since the pandemic, there's been a moratorium on trials. In fact, many trials had to stop, completely. And there's lots of different pieces to the reasons why, including the outcomes, the endpoints, the way the data was being collected. And so these companies were just stopped, and it really was a big shock to the system. And people have since then been scrambling to find the way to create resilient trials. So let's actually pick apart or build the story flow, if you will, of a company. Maybe they're just new in the whole decentralized clinical trial space, and they want to start investigating options that are available to them. So at a much larger vision, at a very high level, there is a myriad of companies that they have the opportunity to interact with, to work with, to help them solve their virtual trial question. Tell us a little bit about why EvidentIQ stands out from the crowd. What is it that you are going to do differently for that company?
First of all, I think it's all about deciding what elements of a trial can be delivered in a virtual mode. And this is actually where we are coming in. We are, first of all, consulting our customers. Because as you said, Natalie, I mean, at the end of the day, the world has changed considerably from a sponsor perspective. All of a sudden, it wasn't possible for patients anymore to come to the sites. So what to do, right? But it's very important as well to look at what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. My view and my company's view is quite clearly that the full adoption of virtual trials will take some time. It will not happen in the next months. It will probably not even happen in the next 1 or 2 years. What happens till then? Till then, actually, most companies will actually look at a model which is a hybrid model. That means some elements of the trials will be conducted in virtual mode, and other elements of the trial will be actually conducted in how it has been done before COVID. Meaning, patients will go to sites and will be basically monitored at the sites. And what makes us unique at EvidentIQ is that we are starting very, very early in the process. So first of all, we are looking at the protocol. We're looking at the endpoints together with our customers. We have a great scientific team actually in-house, and they would actually tell the customer, look, in our view, the trial should be split into a few virtual elements and maybe some more traditional elements. And that's actually the first point. The second point is also to realize what is the technology needed in order to conduct those elements that can be delivered virtually, really in a virtual mode. And we are quite open there. We are very flexible. What we don't want to do is we don't want to overload our customers by maybe selling a big platform to them where they only need some tiny elements of it. We will actually look at, in a most efficient way, how we can actually cover those virtual elements of the trial. And that is basically then a proposal we would make to our customers. And once they have been actually accepted that this is the way forward, we can actually deliver them all technology and all services to make that happen. And again, it's the most efficient way without basically doing too much where too much is not required.
So it sounds really interesting, Andreas. It sounds like there's a big consulting piece that's really helping kind of handhold companies through the process, through the thinking. So that's a big piece about one of your differentiated advantages. But then at the same time, you have a little bit of a glass box build, meaning you're not intimidating people by saying, here's an entire virtual way and completely disrupting everything that they're doing, their frameworks and all those sorts of things. You're sort of building organically and letting people feel comfortable through that digital transformation. So let's actually start from the very beginning. So you're starting to consult with people. You're starting at the very beginning, probably with product profiles and looking at endpoints and sort of discussing the protocols. What are some of the things that you leverage or use in the equation, in the protocol, in the study design that perks your company into suggesting this is good if you do this IRL or in real life, and these are the components that make sense to do virtually? What are those trigger points and those things that flag you to help you lead your clients into making those decisions?
I mean, it's all starting, as you said, with the endpoints. It's starting with the indication. Some indications are allowing for virtualizing more. Other indications are not allowing for virtualizing a lot. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Then also let me say, geographical reach of the study is very, very important. Because if you think about virtualization of elements of a study, we always need to think about patients, how patients are feeling about it. Some indications, if you take serious indications in oncology, for example, patients just want to have this human interaction. They would not necessarily like to have a decentralized approach, although it's on the outskirts, people might think it makes life easier for them. They still like to come to the site and have actually the conversation with a physician or with a nurse. That is something to keep in mind. And that actually varies from indication to indication. It varies also depending on the region and the cultural background where the study is really conducted. So those are all elements we would actually look at. And then an important element is as well looking at technology. Technology doesn't mean necessarily only like a software platform where you can bring all the data together. It also includes some discussion around what, again, it's coming back to the patient, what population we are actually working with. Are these, for example, elderly patients, which might be not that receptive to modern technology, to modern devices, that might even struggle with operating simple, what might be a simple device like an iPhone or like an iPad or anything like that. So that's something also which needs to be taken into consideration. And if you put all those parameters, all those factors together, you can actually come out with a good approach where you can actually split elements, again, as I said before, of the study up in those ones that can be virtualized and those ones that are rather not made for this approach.
So Andreas, let's actually take a look at the two extremes. If we were almost to look at the virtualization of clinical trials on a spectrum, 10 being on the one side where the entire thing can be virtualized, and 0 on the other side is it's just absolutely impossible to virtualize anything. What would be an example of an indication and geography where it could be potentially 100% virtualized? And similarly, on the other side of the spectrum, what would be sort of what would be an indication and potentially geography or culture that would literally make it almost impossible to virtualize any component of the trial? So give us a little bit of an illustration so we have something concrete to understand.
Yeah, something, I mean, on the one hand side of the scale, full virtualization, I would think probably a skin disease, the modest skin disease, could be a very good example. And that's probably in a country or in a geography which is highly digitalized already. That could be, for example, in Europe or the Scandinavian countries. That could be also some countries in Asia Pacific, like Japan, Korea. It could be the United States as well. Basically, where you find a high degree of digitalization anyway. And if you look at it, a moderate skin disease doesn't really require this human interaction. Everything can be done with remote monitoring. There are tools out there in the market, and some of the tools we are providing ourselves, which are part of our platform, are just allowing you actually to speak to the physician over a video chat, as we are doing it right now. It allows also to take photos maybe of your skin disease and send it over by the platform. And basically a physician would just look at it and analyze it. So that's a very good example in this, I think, in this area. If you take maybe on the other side of the scale an example, I would probably say some oncology indications are pretty difficult. And again, if you would look at geographies where digitalization is not that great and not that adapted right now, that could be maybe in some African countries, maybe in some countries in Latin America. It could be also some regions where just the internet is not really reliable. There are a lot of fallouts quite often. And again, if you take then a, let me say, a pretty serious indication in oncology, it actually requires that a patient really gets a CT, for example, like every week or every second week. And things like a CT cannot be done remotely. I mean, it's a big machine and a patient needs to come to the site. So that could be an example there. But I think you will find it really, really rarely that there's rather one extreme or the other. I think most of the trials and most of the indications really lie somewhere in the middle ground, maybe leaning a little bit to the left or to the right.
And so give us an example of a company that, or a hospital or a sponsor that you're working with, and you're saying, hey, there's the components that you're going to use traditional methodologies. Here's why you're going to use it, or what parts you're going to use it. And here's the parts you're going to virtualize. In an average situation, which components of the clinical trial experience do you typically virtualize for companies?
No, I can give you actually loads of examples. I'm not allowed to probably quote a sponsor name here. We're working with quite a lot of those. But there's actually let me say, a larger European sponsor we're working with right now, and they're focusing on diabetes care. And what actually we're doing for them is we are supporting them with a set of elements that are really made for virtualization according to our knowledge and to our analysis as well. Those elements are usually, it's starting all with data collection via with a good eCore application. That is actually one centerpiece of our platform. So we've got an eCore application where that is following a bring your own device policy. The patient really can use their iPhone, they can use their Android phone, they can use their tablet, whatsoever. We are actually setting up questionnaires for them, and we are collecting quality of life data. With some of them, we even have introduced diaries, which are important for diabetes, obviously, to see how the patients are reacting on a day-to-day basis on the medication. So that's the core component. The other component, which is also important, is what I would call a full e-enrollment process. Now, what do I mean with e-enrollment? You've got the classical patient recruitment, which is not really a virtual element because you just need to find patients, and there are a number of recruitment companies out there. We're also doing patient recruitment, but we're going a step further. What we are doing is we have been virtualizing the entire process. So we are finding the patients digitally. We at EvidentIQ are quite delighted to have actually a big asset, and that is a patient platform. And on our patient platform, which is called Carnity, we've got more than 500,000 patients in Europe, but also in the United States, spreading over more than 30 very important indications. So we would actually use that platform to contact our patients virtually. And then we would actually enroll them also virtually. How does that work? The first pre-screening we are also doing virtually via a video chat. The video chat is obviously more than Zoom or Microsoft Teams applications. So those ones are good, but they are not really meant for our purpose. We have developed an e-consent application that also has video functionality. And we're using that actually that either a study nurse or a physician can actually speak with a patient and record screening questions. Now this data is going to be automatically transferred in our EDC application. Then we actually do the full screening of the patient and the same happens. And after that, the patient actually will provide the consent to participate in the trial. And it's an informed consent. So the study nurse or the physician will actually use our technology again to show the patient videos, to show the patient PowerPoints, certain documents that need to be reviewed. That can also happen in a one-on-one virtual conversation. And at the end of the conversation, the patient can actually sign within this application. And again, all the data gets automatically transferred to our EDC system. Same for the eCore data, and that's where it's coming all together. So I think those are two very important elements. I would probably also quote a third one, and that is then e-monitoring. So our application also allows for e-monitoring, specifically if you're thinking again about my skin disease example. The dialogue between physician and patient would take part via that application, and the data is going to be entered on the spot. And again, the data is then actually the eCRF of the EDC system. With that, I think with that approach, we for that particular sponsor we're working with, we've covered quite a big portion of the trial and really made it virtual for them.
So what kind of metrics do you share with potential sponsors about your ability based on this patient portal that you have, where you have many, many patients from across the globe in there? What is your success rate for recruitment rating, time for recruitment? What sort of success metrics do you share with sponsors to say, yes, we want to work with EvidentIQ?
Well, first of all, it's about, it's about what you said as well, Natalie, absolutely. It's about the time to recruitment, the time to find a patient. It's about cost, of course, cost of finding a patient. It's about success rate. It's about dropout rate later on, because that's always a tricky thing from a sponsor perspective. You can have great KPIs actually in terms of outreach, in terms of enrolling patients, but then you also need to look at what's happening later on. That is a dropout rate. So actually, those KPIs we would share with our sponsors, and we would do it not overall. We would do it again per indication, because those are varying obviously per indication. Where we are particularly strong in are actually some really predominant indications in the marketplace, which are oncology, cardiovascular, neuroscience, but then also diabetes, as I mentioned before, but then also some rare diseases really.
Absolutely. What is attracting patients to enroll in that patient portal? Is it a medical education repository? How do you keep it unbiased? How do they ensure that their privacy and security, and they're not just seeing commercials from sponsors? What are you doing in that portal for patients to be attracted there?
First of all, I think that's very important to point out. We're protecting them so that what you just mentioned, it all can happen. So they're protected. They will not get spam from advertisement and whatsoever. So that is something we have actually resolved by our technology. So that there's a big element of protection for our patients. What makes it attractive for patients to join? The most important point is actually that we have been building communities, patient communities, based on the disease, based on the indication. And we even investing quite a lot of money, to be honest, from our company in keeping that up and running and making it attractive for the patients. So we are constantly developing new content for the patients. It's about all information about their disease, really. We are bringing them together in forums, and we are actually moderating those as well. We have professional moderators for those forums. We have professional patient engagement people that are taking actually care of the different groups of patients really in our patient communities. And it's very, very dedicated. So it's not a one-fits-all approach. It's a very dedicated approach based on the needs of the community. There's a lot of content development. We are doing a lot of research projects. We are sponsoring research projects ourselves and making all that content available to our patients free of charge, of course.
So now you've gone through the process of appropriate recruitment, e-consent, and you now have an eligible patient who's now technically enrolled in this virtual or this hybrid clinical trial. How is those patients being earmarked or mapped to specific investigators? And is that still important in this new world of global involvement? And do we ever see the opportunity for a global clinical trial where you can attract a patient from anywhere in the world and it doesn't matter who they're being mapped to as a specific physician investigator?
Yeah, I mean, patients in our platform, or when we're enrolling patients, right, they're not necessarily earmarked. We actually believing in a more patient-centric approach. That means we're asking them all the time. Our approach is a very proactive approach, so we are in constant communication with our patients. I believe some of them would not even like to be earmarked, right? So that kind of mapped to certain investigators. They actually want to be asked. And I think if you look at what is happening in our industry right now, there's actually a big competition for patients. We have actually more trials than ever running, and if you look at it, some of the trials are actually are run for drugs which are pretty similar. And that means this is where the competition for patients is coming about. So for us, it's very, very important to give the patient the feeling that they have a say in what we're doing with them. So we would actually ask them all the time, and how can we do that in an efficient way? Well, this is again coming back to our patient platform. We're applying the technology that we can very easily keep in touch with them.
Absolutely. So let's actually talk about some of your technology. I think a lot of companies are very interested in what does that hardware software look like, especially around electronic data capture, doing things like care transition measures, electronic trial master files. Tell us a little bit about what makes your company and your platform unique and useful.
I believe the uniqueness is coming really from the comprehensive approach. We have been looking at Evidentic when we've been building our platform at what is really required, what is the technology, what are the different elements of technology that are required to run a trial successfully. We are a strong believer in standards, in data standards. As I mentioned initially, in our company, data is coming together with technology. So it's all about data standards and data interoperability. Because if you can't apply standards, then it's very, very difficult to use the data for different purposes actually in the clinical trial. That means as well that the EDC system is really kind of the centerpiece. And that's actually the case with Evidentic. What we've been doing as well is we've been developing then all other functionalities, modules you could say around that, and make it work with our EDC system. What we also support our customers with is, I mentioned the core application already, the consent application. We've got also an electronic trial master file. We've also got a CTMS system, which is quite often combined. We're also a big believer in that usually running an electronic trial master file in a standalone fashion doesn't make a lot of sense really, because it creates a lot of inefficiencies. So we've kind of combined it with our CTMS application. And that again is actually fully integrated with the EDC again. So you can see it's basically a platform of integrated products that are actually covering most of the requirements of any clinical trial. And that allows us, if you're looking at the platform as such, and all the different pieces or modules, you could say, of the platform, to actually define certain use cases. As I mentioned before, e-enrollment is one, e-monitoring is one. There are many other use cases as well. So our approach is more using the technology on a use case basis actually, and putting those use cases, implementing in a way for our customers that it fully supports those use cases. Again, without creating too much overkill or having loads of stuff there, which is not really needed for the trial.
So basically pay for what you use or what you need, which is really interesting. So, we've talked a lot around some of the whole hardware, software, what's going on. Now let's get back to the point about patient centricity, which sounds like you're very, very focused on making these trials revolve around patients in a very big way. Now we are in an interesting era where there's almost like an Uber customization, if you will, around the N=1. So patients being able to pick and choose almost to the point of determining if they want it to be local and in person, or if they want the whole experience to be virtual, or if they want some sort of semblance of something in between. For example, maybe halfway through their clinical trial, they might be going on a vacation and they want that to be virtual, but when they're back at home, they want that to be in real life. How are you modifying protocols, methodology, and processes to accommodate the patient-centric approach?
Yeah, actually, it starts even before the protocol gets finalized. And that's the important point. I think I forgot to mention that before. It's a very important point, Annalie. Our philosophy and our approach is really to start working with sponsors before the protocol gets finalized. And I believe this is at the end of the day where we can have the most significant impact. So our recommendation is always to invest a little bit in this phase and first of all run a feasibility study and look at, based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, which a sponsor is thinking about writing or documenting in the protocol, how does that really work? How can we create out of that a live scenario? And with live scenario, I mean, how can we run the trial? Which geographies, which patients? And once we've done that, we actually are coming up with a set of sample patients. And what we would do then as part of the feasibility study, we would even go one step further. We can use again our patient community to contact some of those patients, those sample patients. And we can just ask them, what is your preference? If you were supposed to participate in that trial, and we are currently thinking about doing it partially virtual, partially the traditional way with you coming on site. What do you think about it? Do you think it makes sense? Would you like it or would you not like it? And that input is what we're bringing back to our sponsors, to our customers. And with that input, they can actually finalize their protocol in a much better way than they could ever do without this information.
Another topic that has become very hot as of late is a lot of discussion around diversity and inclusion, and being able to include underrepresented or underprivileged populations. How has the hybrid or the virtual platform around clinical trials helping to change the paradigm around diversity and inclusion?
I think it's helping quite a lot. I believe, again, virtualization has been kind of a catalyst for exactly that approach. Because it takes a little bit of, first of all, the pool of patients or the theoretical pool of patients for any trial is so much bigger in the virtual world, right? Because if you actually apply for a virtual approach for specific groups of patients, then you can actually use the entire world. You can use a global pool as your input for your specific trial. That's definitely one element of it. The second element, when you're looking at diversity, is also about underprivileged, right? Or it's about race, it's about gender, it's about sexual orientation, it's about all of those things. And again, just by increasing the potential pool of patients, it's making it easier to ensure that you have that element of diversity for your trial, because it doesn't matter anymore. Before, you could actually say, okay, I need a person of a certain race, I need a person of a certain sexual orientation. But if that patient, which would actually qualify with regards to the inclusion criteria, would live like hundreds of miles away from a study site, you could already forget about it, because that patient would never be willing to take that burden on him or herself. But in the virtual world, you can actually basically apply an approach where you just virtualize, maybe just for this one person, or maybe for a bigger group of patients, where you just virtualize the approach here. And that actually allows you to apply a much, much higher degree of diversity to your trial.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the new world of the digital opinion leaders. Before, companies would always go, CROs included, sponsors, go to the same standard, high influencing investigators, and they would go to the standard people over and over again. Has that changed in this new world of hybrid or virtual clinical trials?
I think it has changed as well, and it's very similar to the change we've been experiencing with diversity and with the patients. It's all about increasing the pool, right? It's about increasing the pool of potential key opinion leaders, of potential great investigators. In the old world, those very known individuals would be actually part of a well-known university, of a well-known site network. And as you said before, it would be always the same individuals that would be contacted as key opinion leaders by sponsors. Nowadays, in the virtual world, it's basically much, much bigger. We have experienced actually key opinion leaders and investigators I frankly didn't know before, because they were coming from a remote university hospital I've never heard about. But those are great people. Those are fantastic people with fantastic skills and great know-how, great knowledge, which can really support the entire industry to move forward in a better way. And nowadays, in the virtual world, we can actually reach out to them. We've got the tools and we've got the processes also behind the tools to include them in our trials in the same way as anybody, from a very, very known site, which is kind of next door to my office.
Beautiful. Really nice to see that. Technology is evolving very, very quickly. And we're hearing about several new types of paradigms, including the whole idea around blockchain. Now, of course, we're hearing a lot around more of the currency or the DeFi portion of that with cryptocurrencies and NFTs. But one does have to ask the question about the use of blockchain in an interactional sort of way as it applies to potentially clinical trials, getting data out there, having free access, potentially even monetizing it. So perhaps patients one day might be able to own and monetize their data, depending on which investigators, sponsors, or other researchers might be doing and using and leveraging their data. What does the future of that look like, in your opinion, and where is EvidentIQ fit into that equation?
I believe at the end of the day that is a vision how the industry will actually strive to be in, but it will take a longer time, I would believe. Again, at EvidentIQ, we are a big believer in patient centricity. For us, it's all about the patient. At the end of the day, everything what we're doing every single day is about the patient, making their life better, making it easier for them to get access to medication. Right? That's what it's all about, and that's something we shouldn't forget. So if it comes to data, yes, exactly. The patients are owning their data. Currently, there are many different business models out there, and companies are earning money by using or processing patient data. And I believe what I've seen recently is there are already some attempts for patients to build their own community or communities. And obviously, they're owning their data, and they're trying to commercialize the data of that community. And I believe that is actually something we will see much, much more significantly going forward. And it probably reach a stage where a patient will ask him or herself, why should I make my data available to a commercial company without getting any benefit out of that for myself? Why not joining one of those patient communities and I'm frankly getting paid for it? And I believe this is really where the industry will end up. This is the next big dynamic what we're seeing. And again, from our perspective, actually, we are seeing us as an enabler. We are working with our patients already for more than 10 years on our platform in our different patient communities. And we are seeing us as an enabler. We are not selling the data of our customers. We are selling sometimes results, or when we are asking our patients about certain things, right? Certain questions. That's what we're doing. That is our business model. But I think I can see quite clearly a path forward where, let me say, the funds could get divided, right? The patients would own their data, and they're kind of part of that commercial model as well.
Absolutely. We are moving into an era where we're talking about smart homes, smart cars, fully populated homes with sensors, facial recognition software, ambient biometrics, 24-hour glucose monitors, smartwatches, and the list goes on. Where are these going to fit eventually in software like you use for patient-reported outcomes, and how will this be leveraged in the future for clinical trials?
I think what we will see going forward is, as you said, there are so many more devices which are collecting data at the end of the day. We've got, obviously, in clinical trials, we've got wearables since already quite some time. We've got the smart watches and many more, even more, let me say, state-of-the-art devices collecting data from patients. And what I can see is there will be even more of those. In the smart home scenario, you could imagine so much actually more, right? You could think about, take an easy example, take a bed. A bed is a very easy thing to think about, but nowadays there are very modern beds which can actually record the sleeping or the moving behavior while somebody is sleeping at night. And I think this is kind of an area where you can't see even an end. There can be so many more examples where data for patients is actually collected at home through those devices, right? And that data can be actually then transferred automatically to a centralized database. like an EDC system, for example, for further analysis. So if I look at all those things, I believe those will be actually the mechanism to drive virtualization even further over the next years. And I believe also the adoption rate will be much higher because the fear that some people are experiencing will go a little bit away. If I take again my bed example, well, I mean, as a patient, you don't care. You sleep as you normally sleep in any other bed as well, just with actually the difference that some of the data, what you're doing at night, is getting kind of captured, right, for the benefit of the trial.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And as we think about all things connected, we can't help thinking about AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, smart algorithms, and Oracle chain links, et cetera. And so putting all of this data that's coming in from multiple areas and creating a confluence. So there's predictions and there's an ability to predict people's outcomes. I'm curious about that, but also the advent of other sorts of disparate data, all transmuting into one area. So for example, genome testing and biomarker testing and all kinds of other things, and creating a confluence of this. What is the future of the big data ocean, getting beyond sort of the data bank? Is your company working to create this big place for predictive management of health?
It's actually, it's all about data capturing, and then obviously what you're going to do with the data. What we are doing at EvidentIQ is we are also, we've got a data lake, and we've got a data lake concept. And this is actually the place where all the data is coming together. But I think what you have been just saying, Natalie, it's going even a big step beyond. Because actually, the more data you're getting, right, the smarter you have to be actually to analyze it. And that can actually, in the long run, only work without human intervention. It has to be based on AI. That is the only way forward, because the sheer amount of data is just getting too much. And I think if you look at some aspects of the industry right now, it's already possible, and that is also being done. I've seen actually full automated readings of images, for example, of a tumor, without any human interaction. Obviously, those results have been then compared with the results a radiologist would get out. And guess what? The AI component was even more exact. It was even a better result. And that's just an example, but it's still, it's still early days if you look at those things. But I really believe the industry is moving this direction, and it has to move in that direction, because otherwise it's just getting too much.
It's also a very interesting question about what the word hybrid will mean in the future, especially as a lot of people are talking and building this concept called Metaverse, where you basically can be engulfed in an experience that will feel real life. So in other words, what somebody may say is immersive, and that they want to go see their physician or nurse or whatever, could potentially in the future be completely virtual. What's your thoughts about the Metaverse?
That is happening already now. It's early days, but I think the same concept actually applies obviously to the clinical trials industry as well. And if you really take the word virtual to what it means actually that you should be able to conduct a clinical trial and get certain results without any patient at all. And that is actually, you can do just on the basis of data mining combined with some genomics analysis, I would think. And there have been actually, as a prototype, some trials already conducted in that fashion. So it's exactly that combination. Some basically genomic analysis combined with retrospective analysis of data of patients, which are sitting, as we all know, in electronic health records. They're sitting in insurance registries and in many other places. It's just a question of finding the right technology, and their AI comes into the play again to mine that data and to bring the result back to the purpose. But again, that has happened already now. I've seen actually some prototypes, and I believe that will be also definitely a direction the industry will move towards too.
It's really interesting to see discovery and identification with clinical trials in silica and mathematical models, and It's going to be a very interesting world. With all of this to say, a lot of innovation will be culminating very quickly. The question for you, or my final question, and although I have many, many questions, is how are we going to pay for all of this? We're going to be doing discovery very quickly, potentially without even patients. There's going to be new clinical trial protocols. There's probably going to be management and assessment just using people's genetics. So at the end of the day, how are we going to have this influx of innovations that nobody could pay for?
I think the financing of all those innovations has been always an issue. They have been a tricky thing, because if you look at it, there have been a few payers in the industry, and there have been just only some, I would say, more old-fashioned commercial models around that. I believe going forward, in order to be able to finance all of that, there has to be a much closer collaboration between the different parties in the commercial model in our industry. You've got obviously the traditional pharmaceutical companies, right? You've got the CROs, you've got all this industry, you've got my industry, which are kind of vendors or suppliers to CROs or to the pharmaceutical industry. You've got payers, you've got insurances, right? You've got patients. We just discussed patients themselves, which are also might think about having a bigger commercial advantage going forward based on their data. That all needs to become much closer together. And I'm a strong believer that in the future, maybe in 10 years from now, we will see alternative commercial models. Nobody will be thinking about it right now or has ever been thinking about it, but those alternative models have to come to play. Otherwise, I think, I completely agree with you, Natalie, it will be difficult to finance all of that.
I'm kind of predicting, and maybe some people may not understand when I say this, but I do believe that in some ways we're going to see fractionated companies. I don't think that you're going to see companies in the same way. I think that people will be purchasing medicines and even potentially sponsoring individuals as NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting things with the whole blockchain, tokenization of everything. So I'm in complete agreement with you, Andreas. Fascinating conversation. I think we can speak for hours about this. I apologize. I've been calling your company EvidentIQ. It's EvidentIQ. Yes. So my apologies about that. But it's either way. It sounds like it's a fascinating name. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate. If anybody's also interested in this conversation, I want to let you know that please look for the show notes to contact Andreas Weber. We have his contact details if you're interested in collaborating, partnering, asking more questions about decentralized or hybrid trials. Check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations we have all the time in our asynchronous and synchronous touch points with physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, patients. We work with people through a variety of touch points over time to help them solve problems, do work, and actually come up with really innovative ideas. We want to thank everybody for their time. Please like and subscribe, and we would really appreciate if you could leave us some feedback on iTunes as well. So thanks, everybody. And Andreas, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
That's been a pleasure. Many thanks, Natalie.